privilege, as Phil has allowed me to do, to introduce our two next speakers. I'm lucky enough to be the chair of our Sustainability Committee for Hornsby, our Environmental Sustainability Advisory Committee. It's a fantastic group of people who have joined council to share their expertise, but we also have some fantastic staff who are doing wonderful things across a whole range of areas. So tonight we have Julie Ryland and Susie Smith, who have joined us. I'm going to hand over to them now while they give a presentation on where we're up to in our sustainability programs, because they're fantastic. So Julie, Susie, over to you.
Thanks, Janelle, and good evening, Mr. Mayor and residents. For those of you who haven't met me, as Janelle said, my name's Julie Ryland and I'm the Strategy Manager at Hornsby Council. I also look after the sustainability team, so I have Susie Smith, who is our Sustainability Officer, who looks after a lot of our community engagement. And just thank you for the opportunity to come and be able to talk to you this evening. I do have a presentation that I will put up for you. Okay. Sorry, I've got two screens, so I just have to make sure they both actually work. So for those of you who don't know, Hornsby Council has done a huge amount of strategic work over the last 12 to 18 months, and this has put us in really good stead to have an understanding of where we want to be in the future. At the moment, we've adopted a climate-wise Hornsby plan, a biodiversity conservation strategy, an urban forest strategy, a waste matter strategy, and a water-sensitive Hornsby strategy. And all of these wrap up into our overarching document, which is the Sustainable Hornsby 2040. And this work really sets us in good stead. It's a lot of background work that's been done over the years. There was a lot of community engagement, and it formed the basis of our local strategic planning statement. And it's looking how we start to be more sustainable in the future. Something that Susie and I will talk about specifically tonight is our climate-wise Hornsby plan, because it's one that we actually have courage to implement. In council in year before, actually adopted a target of net zero by 2050. So what we looked at was corporate emissions and also our community emissions. So in order to meet that target of net zero emissions by 2050, we started looking at what that science-derived targets would mean. So when I mean science-derived targets, it's looking at the global carbon emissions, then what does it mean for Australia, what does it mean for New South Wales, and then what does it mean for us as a LGA and as an organisation. And we started to set some goals on that trajectory down to net zero. So we have a target of 32% reduction on 2018 levels by 2025 for council, a 53% reduction on 2018 levels by 2030, and looking at carbon neutral by 2041, and then that net zero, so it's taking out all emissions, not just carbon emissions, by 2050. For the community, it's a very similar trajectory, but there is just one little difference. We have a baseline emissions of 2017-18, and the reason that we've got a difference between our corporate and our community is because we have data from Resilient Sydney, which gives us data from 2017-18 for the community. Sorry, 2016-17 for the community. And we've got a lot of really good information from council in 2017-18. So that's why we've actually got those two different years as our base years. When we look at our corporate emissions for 17-18, majority is made up of electricity consumption, and that's coming from council facilities such as our library, our community centres, our administration building, and aquatic centres and things like that. So that's taking up about 35% of our total emissions. The other 35% actually comes from street lighting, and sometimes people aren't aware that council is responsible for paying for street lighting. So that's the residential roads and also the main roads, and that's 35% of our emissions. So electricity collectively actually takes up 70% of our emissions. So that's a huge source of emissions for us. The next largest component is transport fuels. So that's looking at our light passenger vehicles and our trucks, so our parks trucks that are driving around. We then have contractor fuels, which comes up as 9%. So that's the garbage trucks that drive around, because council contracts out our garbage services. So we do report on all the emissions for our contractors as well. And then the next one's in regards to natural gas. So where we're heating our aquatic centres, so Hornsby Aquatic Centre and Galston Aquatic Centre, That's where majority of our gas is used. So that's 7% of our total emissions. And then we also report on emissions such as our paints, the stationery that we use, the accommodation, the water, the flights. So anything within the scope 1, 2 or 3 emissions for a council, we report against. And we've got a reporting tool that we input every purchase that council's made, go through that reporting tool, and that's how we come out with our emissions factor at the end. For the community, it's a very similar profile where 58.9% of the emissions from the community come from electricity, and that's people's households, industry. Transport's the next largest sector, so that's people's cars, buses, trains. And then the third largest is from waste. So that's from domestic waste, so your garbage services that are picked up, and then gas. So not a lot of our area uses gas. We have a lot of rural areas which use bottled gas, and unfortunately we can't get the details for bottled gas, but anyone who's on mains gas, we do report against that as well. So electricity is our largest consumer from a community perspective. In relation to our emissions, we've got data going back to 2013, and so this is for all of Hornsby Council, all of Hornsby local government area. So from 2013 to 2018-19, and we've got some updated data which is coming on shortly for 19-20 and then 2021. The emissions are actually going down, but they're going down very slowly. And what we need, if we wanted to get to that net zero by 2050, we need a very steep trajectory to start going down. So you can see the emission sources via the sources there. So we've got gas, we've got transport, waste and electricity, and they're slowly coming down, but very slowly, as I said. In relation to where those emissions are actually coming from, we can determine that nearly 50% of the emissions from our local government area are coming from residential detached dwellings. So that's single households. They're making up the majority of the emissions that are coming out. We then have non-residential, so retail. We've got Westfields, we've got a couple of smaller shopping centres as well. So they're our next highest emission user. Multi-unit residential then follows after that with 8%. We then have health. So we have a very large health sector, particularly focused around Hornsby Hospital and the ancillary services that come out around that area. So health makes up that next sector. The industrial sector is quite small for Hornsby. We do have 3 industrial areas. We've got Mount Ku-ring-gai, we've got Hornsby and we've got Thornleigh, but we don't have really heavy intensive industries like some other local government areas have. So industrial area is not that large for us. We then have commercial and then residential attached, which is looking at your townhouses and things like that. And then education makes up the last component. We do have 56 schools in our local government area, but they're not making up a huge emission source for us at the moment. So that residential detached, so that single dwelling is where we're actually getting the majority of our emissions coming from the community. What we've looked at is across metropolitan Sydney, we do have data on the average daily usage for electricity, and Hornsby is unfortunately coming in as the 5th highest. So Hunters Hill is the largest consumer in metropolitan Sydney. We've then got Ku-ring-gai, so that's our neighbour, and we also like to benchmark ourselves against Ku-ring-gai, so it's good to see we're lower than them. But then we have Sutherland, Woollahra, and then Hornsby. So Hornsby is quite high. We do have a very old housing stock in some areas, which don't have a lot of insulation or single glazed windows as well. So what we'd like to do is slowly see that emission level come down per household or per person as we move forward. Something that can reduce the emissions in regards to residential consumption is the installation of solar. So we do have that nice trajectory where solar is actually going up from 2013-14 through to 19-20, which is fantastic. So that solar is increasing, and the different shades actually indicate the sizes of the systems that are being installed. So on the bottom, that burgundy colour is looking at less than a 2.5 kilowatt system. The green's looking between a 2.5 and a 5 kilowatt system. The purple's looking at 4.5 to a 6.5 kilowatt system. And then we go all the way up to between 50 and 100 kilowatt systems. So we do have large systems that are going on. We know Barker has a very large system going on. We've got other commercial properties that have large systems going on as well. So it's great to see those large roof spaces being utilised for solar installation. What we would really like to do is see that solar increase across the suburbs. We have about 21% of our local government area have solar on residential housing, and we'd like to see that increase over time. One thing that Council has done is we've just recently joined with the Australian Photovoltaic Institute in rolling out a program called Sunspot. So this is a program which will actually map the solar potential on any residential house. And I've just picked, I think it was 27 Quarter Sessions Road, and that's just dropped the pin right in the middle of Quarter Sessions Road there. So this is kind of on the corner of Ruddock Park down there, so that you have a bit of an understanding of what this looks like. You'll see a number of different dots across this, and they're different colours. Those dots actually indicate the amount of solar radiance that hits that little square. So the red is high solar radiance, so it means that you've got really good solar cover for that area. And then you go down to the dark blue and the light blue areas, and that's actually where you're going to get shading. So it does map where trees are, and it will map if you've got any shading on your roof. This is a free tool that's available to anyone. With the minutes, Phil, I'll actually send out a link to this as well, so that residents can do this by themselves. Susie is also available to walk people through this process. It's a very easy tool where you just draw a little circle, or a square on the top of your house. It'll map the availability of solar for your roof. It'll give you the size of the solar system that you can actually install on your roof. It'll give you an indication of the potential costs for that. And you can also input your electricity consumption. So from your bills, you can input your electricity consumption, and it will actually give you the payback periods as well. So that's something we're happy to walk people through on either an individual basis, or we can run workshops with you on how to use this tool. And it's something that we'd like to get out to the community and get people to start talking about solar and looking at the opportunities that exist to reduce our emissions moving forward. Some of the other things that we've done as part of the Climate Wise Hornsby plan is we've developed an emission reduction action plan for both council and also the community. In regards to council, we can look after our emissions and we can make decisions over that. So we've recently, I think 2018, we made the decision to change out around 4,500 street lights on residential roads, and we've upgraded them to LED lighting. That's given us a really good emission reduction. So street lighting, as you would have noticed in that first slide that I had, made up about 35% of our emissions. We're down to about 28%, and we're hoping to complete the rollout by the end of this year, and that'll bring us down to about 25%. So that's given us a really good emission reduction just by implementing that one project and changing out our street lights to LED. We've also looked at LED lighting and air conditioning upgrades across our facilities. So at our aquatic centres, our community centres, we've looked at the energy efficiency and solar capability. So towards the end of this year, we'll be going out for requests for quotes to install solar on 5 new community facilities. Unfortunately, some of our facilities can be quite old. We did start with 9 community centres that we were looking at, but just due to either asbestos roofing or insufficient ability to be able to put solar on the roofs, that knocked out a couple of our community centres, unfortunately. But we do have 5 new community centres that are going to receive solar, hopefully by the end of this year or certainly early next year. And we've also been working with our town planning staff to look at Hornsby Town Centre. We've got a Hornsby Town Centre master plan that's being developed, so looking at the development of our town centre. And we're looking at that being a net zero carbon precinct. So any new developments that occur in those areas, so they need to be energy efficient and that they will meet our target of net zero by 2050. So there's some of the things that we're working on corporately. And then as a community, what we're looking at is how can council facilitate the process of EV charging infrastructure. We adopted an EV charging on public land policy in 2019. And that has allowed us to start partnering with private organisations. So we will have an EV infrastructure hopefully in the next couple of months. The DA has been approved, and Jolt Charge has partnered with Ausgrid, and we should be getting a EV charging facility on Pacific Highway out the front of, I think it's a BMW dealership. So that should be installed in the next couple of months. Hasn't cost council anything. It's been funded through private infrastructure and through a partnership with Ausgrid, which is fantastic. And residents will have the ability to charge for free up to 15 minutes, which I think equates to about 7 kilowatts, and then they can pay if they wanted to do a top up after that. We're also looking at environmental upgrade agreements. So how can we work with businesses to improve their facilities? So looking at low interest loans that council can facilitate. We wouldn't take on any of those responsibilities, but it's looking at how it can actually relate back to the rateable property. We're also looking at lighting upgrades on main roads. So looking at the similar success that we had on our residential roads, looking at how we could actually work with RMS and RTA, I think they're called now. Oh no, RTA, they were RTA, now they're RMS on main roads. Everyone changes their names too often. And we're looking at community education campaigns. So looking at, meeting with you guys like we are this evening, coming out to different community groups, looking to explain and talk about the projects that we're working on, but also looking at how we can work with you. So what information would community groups like, and how can we facilitate that process? And we've had a lot of questions around community solar farms. So that's something that we're looking to investigate in the future as well. Some of the other things that we've implemented recently, and this was implemented just before we hit lockdown, and I'm still happy to say it's been a very successful trial. You may have seen we've got car share, which has been installed in 11 locations across the Shire. So we've got some floating spots which are up at Asquith and Hornsby. We also have dedicated on-street, so they're the 11 spots that we have installed where you've got designated car parking spots. They're at Pennant Hills, Waitara, and around Hornsby. And there's also a couple which are on private property that GoGets have developed with developers as well. So this is a car sharing program. Businesses can actually sign up for free. So if you know of any businesses, they can sign up for free. They get free membership. They obviously pay for the use of the vehicle, but they don't have to pay for a membership. And it's a way that we're trying to get people to either get rid of that third or second vehicle. We have very high car ownership in the Hornsby Shire. So it's getting people to start thinking about alternate methods. This one is outside the Pennant Hills train station. And as you can see, Mr. Mayor was wonderful there to launch this program as well. And it's been a really good uptake. Membership is increasing steadily, even through COVID, because people are not wanting to get onto public transport. They're looking at utilising that car share vehicle. They do have very good cleanliness policies during COVID, so that's something which we have actually made sure that that's being kept up as well. Another one, as I've mentioned before, that electric vehicles. We also have a lot of information now on our website around electric vehicles. So we're looking to support the community through that process, just getting people to have an understanding of what electric vehicles are, how they work. There's also a couple of locations. We've got Pennant Hills Shopping Centre, there's Cherrybrook Shopping Centre, and also Dural McDonald's, which have EV charging, and it's free for people to go. So they're looking at EV charging in destinations. So you can go do your shopping, you can charge your vehicle while you're there at the same time. So we're looking at trying to minimise that range anxiety for people so that they feel like they can actually do a lot of their daily commutes. Most of the commutes that people do are quite small, and they're just running around the neighbourhood and not going too far. So looking at reducing that range anxiety. We're also working with Business Australia on a business energy advice program, and I'll throw over to Susie for this one because this is one that Susie's been implementing. So Susie, do you want to give an update on the business energy advice program?
Thanks, Julie. This program is available through Business Australia and the Business Chamber. They used to be called the New South Wales Chamber of Commerce, but they've rebranded. Very easy way for a small business between 6 and 20 employees to get solid advice based on their industry, based on the kind of work that they do, on how to get real energy savings. It's a very easy sign-up process. It's just literally going to that link down the bottom of the slide. A consultant will call back and ask pertinent questions to your industry, gather some more advice about your energy usage, look at the different grants and programs that might be available to help you implement those savings, and then follow through with you on those savings. And we've had about, I think it's 240 businesses go through now, Julie. And we're seeing definite spikes in membership when community groups go out. like yourselves and start talking to their friends and family and people on the street. So for example, we've met with a number of groups and we see 30 or 40 different inquiries come in each time. So it's a very solid way. It's a bit of a call to action actually, to get energy efficiency within small business. And what we see when small businesses implement energy efficiency is that people who are working in those businesses take those innovations home. So it's kind of it's a double your money. It gives us really great exponential benefits and synergies throughout the community. So this is something I'd really encourage you to promote. And if you need any further information, you can write me and I can send you some more details. But the website has absolutely everything.
Excellent. Thanks, Susie. And just following on from what Daniel was talking about previously, getting prepared is something that we are encouraging all of our community to do. We need our community to be resilient. We know that we've had a lot of shocks and stresses over the last couple of years, be it flood, fire, COVID is another stress that's being placed on us. So council's working with Resilient Sydney. So Resilient Sydney is a collective of the 33 metropolitan councils coming together to look at how we can be more resilient as a community, not only within Hornsby Shire, but also with our neighbours, so Ku-ring-gai, Baulkham Hills, Hawkesbury, and then the wider Sydney community as well. We've also partnered with Red Cross to roll out the Get Prepared app, and I'd be pleased to say this is our third year of doing it, and we were the highest council last year to download the Red Cross app and actually getting prepared. So like Daniel was saying, getting prepared is the best thing that you can do. It's the best thing that you can do to help not only yourself, but your neighbours, your family. It takes the stress out of those emergency situations. You've already thought about it. You've already prepared yourself. You know what you're going to do. You know where you're going to go. You know what you need to take with you as well. Emergency Ready Week is coming up from the 20th to the 27th of September. So we're going to be encouraging people to download the app during that week and also to get prepared. While you're at home is a perfect opportunity. We have nowhere else to go. So go out, clean your gutters, you know, put away the firewood that might be sitting around your house. Exactly what Daniel was saying. So it's just fantastic to hear that you've got a really engaged rural fire service in your community as well. It's a free app. It's very easy to go through. It actually just kind of ticks it off as you go. You can do it in one sitting, or you can actually come back. It'll tell you, that little red bar will tell you whether or not you've completed each component. So it's looking at the basics of, you know, what's around your house, getting connected. So who do you need to be in contact with, getting organised. Okay, if I need to go, what documents do I need to take with me? If I need to pack. And it actually has little prompts as well. So if you don't think of everything, it's got some prompts about, well, do you have pets? And okay, where would the pets go? And what do you need to carry them in? Don't forget to take your food with you. Are you on medication? If you are on medication, don't forget to take your medication with you. What about your scripts and things like that? So it actually is a really easy process to start getting you through. And it's really good because it also then says, have you got your bushfire plan as well? So the RFS has that link to get that bushfire plan, and I would encourage everybody to do that as well. So you'll see flags up through Hornsby Mall at the moment, on Pacific Highway, out at Galston. We've got the flags, the mesh flags and mesh fencing. So you'll start to see a lot of things around Get Prepared over the next couple of weeks, which is really good. And I just encourage everybody to do that. Something else that I would just point people in the direction of is have your say. As Janelle said, you see a lot of different things that come out from council. And that's a terrible photo of me, but unfortunately I'm actually on the website for the Have Your Say. And you can actually sign up to a weekly email. So instead of going to our website each week and having an understanding of what's on there, if you want, you can go up, you can sign up to that weekly email, and you'll receive an email from council to tell you everything that's on public exhibition for that week. So it's a really good way to have an understanding of what council's engaging on. And we do engage on a wide array of projects and programs. One that I'm involved with at the moment is your community strategic plan. So that's the highest level document that council have. It sets our 10-year vision of what we want the Hornsby Shire to be. And we currently have that survey out at the moment asking the community, what's your vision of Hornsby Shire for the next year, 10 years? what's the challenges that you're currently facing? What's your big idea that we could be implementing in the future? And also, what's your priorities? So council does have a finite budget, and how do we actually start prioritising some of that strategic work that we've done over the last couple of years? So with the presentation that I'll forward to Phil, I'll also send out a link to the Have Your Say page and also the survey. And if I could just ask everyone to fill in that survey, because we'd really like to know what your vision is for Hornsby Shire. So it's a great way of getting involved. So that's my plug. And how can we engage with you? So this is something which Susie and I are always keen to have an understanding of. You are the lifeblood of our community. You're out there, you know what's going on day in, day out. How can we be here to assist with that? How can we engage with you on that? How can we work together to get information out to that wider networks that you've got as well? So this is kind of throwing it to the floor. I'll take it down so I can see people's faces, but I'd love to have a conversation around how can we engage with you?
Oh, I'll kick that off. That was just wonderful.
Yeah.
That's music to my ears. That fills me with such hope that there's people like you working in our community, working in our council for our community, and doing these wonderful initiatives. And it's amazing. Community is everything. It's how we'll get through. And with people like you pulling the community together, we stand so much more chance of being successful. I do have a couple of questions. I noticed that that community is 50% of the power, and that's actually really positive, because it means as a community we can actually do something ourselves. We are empowered to make a difference ourselves. So every little bit we save. I was interested. You showed the savings with power. That trend line. If you draw a trend line, where does it actually cross? Does it hit it 2050 or earlier?
No, no. The current trend line won't actually hit 2050, which is why we need that steep decrease to start happening now.
So in light of the report, the IPCC report, is that something that you guys will take between the teeth and start acting on, or is that something that people need to encourage council to modify the timescale to an earlier date in order to be effective?
Look, I'd have to say council's actually doing really well, and the fact that we got our Climate Wise Hornsby plan and we've got that target of net zero by 2050 already sets us in really good stead to deliver on the projects that we're working on. By having that target of net zero by 2050, it's allowed us to work with our planners to look at that Hornsby Town Centre master plan upgrade. So it's actually, we're doing the work now. It's actually really good and really positive. I think at the moment, as I said, we can control what we look after. It's that community process of how can we, we can't force residents to do things. We can encourage, we can facilitate, we can collaborate. There's only a few of us, so that's why we need these networks to be able to get out and start communicating and get that message out there. I think if we work collectively together, we can achieve this. And as I said, like council, it's not only from an environmental perspective, but from a financial perspective, we're actually making really good savings. So that LED project that we did, we've got great emissions that are coming out of it, but it's actually allowed me, from my perspective, to put, I think it was $600,000 back into our budget, which has now gone to implement other programs within the organisation. So from a financial perspective, it's getting really good uptake, and we're getting those environmental wins. As a council, we're doing our stuff. It's how do we get that community? So really interested to see. Yeah.
I was going to say, in terms of engaging with the community, I mean, obviously online, social media, Facebook, but a lot, we're finding that in our suburb, and it's probably true of some of the other suburbs as well, like a lot of the older people are not as, IT savvy. We usually put out a newsletter before our meetings, so in March and in September, and we'd be more than happy for you to contribute information in those newsletters if you wanted to, because we find that that's how we reach every household in Westleigh, and particularly those that perhaps aren't on Facebook or you know, Instagram or whatever all the time. And the other thing, I chatted to Phil, that Sunspot program or the tool, whether that's something as a committee that we should think about, whether we host an event either in real life or on Zoom, where residents can, you know, as you said, that you could walk people through how to use, because I certainly want to go and have a play with it, you know, how to do that. And so that, because there's conversation in the local Facebook pages a lot of the time about, you know, anyone has experience with solar installation and stuff like this, and so there's definitely interest out there, and whether we think about, as a committee, I said we'll talk about this, whether we look at asking you ladies to come and give another presentation just about that, and maybe even the business program too. Some of the people might be small business owners or employed by a small business, and that's something that we could perhaps look at doing in the next month or two.
Sounds fantastic. They're things that I'm totally on board with.
Unfortunately, we won't have another Avocare, which is our newsletter, until March next year.
Okay.
But yeah, certainly, you know, we're often looking for things to put in it, so that would be great to have something about the sustainability and things of the statistics and how Hornsby Shire is faring, and what residents can do.
Sounds wonderful.
Julie, I wanted to know, you meant when you're talking about greenhouse emissions, you mentioned single glazed windows. What, I thought that's what the majority of houses had. We're not in England.
Yeah. So in regards to
what difference does that make?
So in regards to single glazed windows, if you don't have curtains that are draped over them, or if you haven't got anything, so during winter you will actually lose heat going out in winter, and in summer you'll actually have heat coming in through your windows, particularly if you've got the sun hitting your windows. So you would need to have outdoor shading, either via trees or blinds or things like that as well. But yeah, even though we're not in England as well, what they're finding is that they actually do it correctly. They seal their houses really well. We have very leaky houses. Actually, that's something else that I can just promote as well. When our libraries open back up, we do have kits that you can actually borrow for energy efficiency. So you can plug in little devices and it'll tell you how much energy is being drawn from your fridge or microwave. There's also I can never say the word right, like a thermometer gun that you can actually point.
It's a laser.
Yeah, it's like a little laser, and it'll actually it'll tell you whether or not you've got a leaky window, and so you can see drafts coming in and out as well. So that's actually really good to do, and it's free. If you've got a library membership, you can borrow it for 14 days. If you want it for longer, you can re-borrow it again. So
okay, insulation would be another good thing, wouldn't it?
Absolutely,
to ensure that homes have that. So,
and
my point I was going to say, Dana, with you talk about some people are not very good on the social media. I'm not a social media person myself, but when I took on this role in the Treasurer, one of the things that was suggested was that I check in on the local page, the Westleigh Normanhurst
Hornsby community,
and I'm surprised how much people do post on it, and they respond and things that get going. And at the moment, there's a lot being said about, like during the pandemic, you know, a lot of us are sort of getting on board in terms of helping out with where there's help required for people who are struggling at the moment with food and helping out, things like that. So it is actually far more reaching than I had realised, and it's been a learning curve for me, but it might be another way and another avenue, because you probably need many avenues to engage with the community.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Are there any other questions for Julie and Susie?